right. I'm excited to share this next episode with you. I had the privilege of sitting down with my friend, Dr. Meghaan Lurtz, who is a global expert in the psychology of financial planning. We jumped right into the conversation, and honestly, I got so engaged, I forgot to formally introduce her. So I'll do it now. Meghaan is a professor of practice at Kansas State University, where she teaches in the advanced financial planning and financial therapy programs. She's also a lecturer on financial psychology at Columbia and is a partner at Shaping Wealth, a platform focused on human first financial guidance. So without further ado, let me bring to you my conversation with Dr. Meghaan Lurtz.
Two are the ones that sound more like invitations to the brain,
Mm.
where you're saying, would you be willing? If you ever can't get paperwork from a client or you have a teenager and you want them to bring home milk, or you don't want your spouse to murder you when you say, oh crap, I forgot to pick up this thing. Can you go get it? You just type to them, would you be
Would you be
willing?
willing? It's
Would
so
you be
powerful.
willing?
Yeah.
And it's that invitation,
Why is
whereas
that so
normally I'd be like, can you
powerful?
pick up some milk?
Yeah,
They'd be
can you
like,
go pick
no.
up some milk? Yeah, no,
They
please pick
won't
up,
even think
even
anything,
please pick up
but
some milk, right?
yeah, still, no.
Why is willing so
It
powerful, Meghaan?
it creates cognitive dissonance in the brain. You're like,
Oh,
wait, am I not willing?
am I not a
Like
willing person? Is that what it is? I'm not a
yeah,
willing person?
yeah.
That's,
And people don't like that feeling.
you're
And
right.
so they are much more likely to be like, well, I am willing.
Willing.
Like, and so it happens a lot faster than that, but we don't like that phrase. We're like, we're being just the, so you, I dislike the do-it-yourself industry, especially
Yeah.
when it comes to money, because as a knower of things in psychology, I'm not a psychologist, but studied a lot of psychology at this point, and I can tell you that every behavioral model,
Yeah.
intentional change theory, trans-theoretical model of change, planned behavior, planned reasoned behavior, all of these have within them a social element. So to just like chop that out of any behavioral model, let alone the advice and like how, like if you want to go to the gym more often, get a friend or
Yeah.
have a financial have a buddy at the gym.
Accountability partner.
Welcome to AFO Wealth Management Forward, a podcast powered by Arrowroot Family Office that's at the intersection of accounting, wealth management, behavioral finance, technology, and entrepreneurship. We help accounting firms and financial advisors grow their practice by going beyond the numbers as we learn from industry leaders and subject matter experts to discover the secret to their success. A podcast that highlights everything from the transformative power of AI to embracing the human-first approach of behavioral finance to help you understand the psychological and emotional relationships to money and meaning. Here is your host, Rory Henry, director at Arrowroot Family Office and author of Holistic Guide to Wealth Management.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to eat better, get your partner, like your partner at home, whether it's your roommate, your
Yeah.
spouse, whatever, to commit to the same thing. If you want to take up a new hobby, go take a class and be within, that community. We don't just like read underwater basket weaving and then decide I'm going to
Just
do
said
that
we're best
tomorrow.
weaver.
Yeah. And so like that, like finance works in the same way. Like you need a buddy. And we
Yeah.
have lots of information, like lots of data that would even show that, like we kind of joke about how like the Christmas thing, like that was such kind of a bad idea, but people put money away, but they were all doing it, it was social.
Yeah.
Looking at, some of I just totally lost that guy's name too. He has more affiliated with the church. He does the financial peace stuff. He uses groups of people so well,
Yeah.
because they like try to save to a goal of the group. And so, everybody saves at their own rate, but to get
Yeah.
everybody saving to whether we can hit this goal as a
Collect a
group,
leaderboard. Yeah.
like that kind of stuff. I don't know how we don't use that more, even in like large financial planning offices. Can you imagine like we're going to
Yeah.
save collectively this year like $6 billion? I mean, you could say something crazy like that,
Yeah.
and then because it would work, and then you would. So anyway, I hate it that people think And so much of our governmental system, so much of the way that we treat retirement in the US, is just like, figure it out, do it yourself, and then we have a great fear of financial professionals, and most of the, if not all the financial professionals I know, CPAs, CFPs, CHFCs, AFCs, they are incredibly caring people, and to not get more people into their hands when we do
Yeah.
need help with this.
We
it's
should
just
really
scary.
take the certified and make it caring. Caring
Yeah,
public accounting, caring
yeah, yeah.
financial
I'm
professional.
down.
Yeah.
That'd probably be a much better sales pitch
That's what you
than
give to the
certified.
CPA and the CFP board to adopt
I'm
it,
in.
right?
I will find that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's almost goes back to the one-to-many model. A lot of some of these leading firms that are on the leading edge are doing that subscription type of service, especially
Mhm.
for those folks that may not have the AUM, right? That do need that financial
Sure.
planning help. You can do that one-to-many, and you can get that group type of atmosphere to help people stay accountable, and then you can learn with other folks and be part of a community, right?
Right, right. I think it's so important to be part of a community. As you're learning, you learn from others. We learn sometimes what not to do, simply
Yeah.
because we talk to somebody. We, can like battle buddy, link arms and walk through some hard stuff together. We can learn together. We can experiment with each other. We have somebody to talk to, when something goes wrong, and somebody to celebrate with.
Yeah.
When something goes right, my little Substack that I have is called Less Lonely Money, because I was going to name it Lonely Money, and my husband said, "Don't do that. That sounds really bad,
Yeah, it's too sad.
too dark."
It's too dark.
And so we decided to call it Less Lonely Money, but because money is
So
a
it's
lonely,
only semi-dark.
really semi-dark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Money it's a lonely place. It's a lonely topic, and it doesn't need to be. It doesn't
Well,
need to be.
Are you an accountant looking to generate more revenue and secure your future success as automation and artificial intelligence revolutionize the accounting profession? If so, contact us at AFO Wealth Management Forward. We specialize in helping accountants and advisors just like you build a custom brand to pinpoint your optimal clientele, generate highly qualified leads through our data-driven digital marketing, and execute wealth management growth services to bring more value to your firm and your client's life. Our strategic approach to branding, marketing, and wealth management is carefully tailored to attract ideal clients, increase customer retention rates, and cultivate lasting relationships with clients across generations. Visit wealthmanagementforward.com to book your free consultation to find out how you can elevate your practice.
let's explore that, Megan. We're just going to kind of roll here, but let's explore that because it is a taboo subject, right? And that's why
Yeah.
it can be lonely. Let's dive into there. And if we have this vision of a community and advising people, are they going to be willing to share, their finances and where they're at and be vulnerable?
I think a lot of that, it's kind of like leadership comes from the top, that
Yeah.
same sort of idea. If you have a financial planning firm or a CPA firm for that matter, I'm not even sure that it matters. And you said, look, here we're going to talk. We're going to get together with our community. Maybe you serve dentists, maybe you
Yeah.
serve doctors, maybe you serve women entrepreneurs. I don't care. But if you have a whole group of those people and you get them together once a quarter and you celebrate something, or maybe you get them together to talk about something that's very specific, to their needs, or
Yeah.
maybe you get them together and say, like, right now, hey, the world's kind of a crazy place, let's get together and let's just talk about, what's going on and how we feel. When you, as the financial professional, normalize that
Yeah.
and say, this is important. This is a normal thing to be talking about. This is a normal thing to get together and discuss. Then you set the stage. You've now made it normal for everybody else. And people are going to come, they're going to mingle, they're going to meet other people, they're going to exchange stories. And that is meaningful, especially in a time like now. But I think even generally, that
Yeah.
it matters to see other people who are doing what you're doing. It matters to see other people who have been where you were. It
Yeah.
matters to see, other people having success. And I don't think that we always think of our client appreciation nights like that. But I think if we did, think of our client appreciation nights as like, let's get the team together, and let's celebrate and talk about something that matters to us collectively, then I think very quickly, you tear down those walls. I mean, that's one of the magical things about being a financial professional is that you're like in this room, in this office, in this Zoom meeting, within these walls, we are going to talk about money in a different way.
Intimately.
And it's okay to do that here. It's like going to the yoga class, and the yoga class is like, you need to do what you need to do. I'm going to hold space, play in Shavasana. You can, do this or do that. When you get into a financial planning office, it's like, we can talk about 401ks. We can also talk about the fact that this feels really scary. We can talk about the fact that your kid got into Harvard. We can talk about the fact that you're getting a divorce and how you want to divide this stuff equally and want somebody on your team. Like the types of conversations that you get to have simply by virtue of working with a financial professional is hugely important for people's financial language, people's financial knowledge, people's financial relationships with themselves, with their partners, and certainly with the planner.
Yeah. I'm big on the consultative approach. And I think that we are shifting from the historic need to be the expert in the room here, Meghan, and that expertise approach. And I get it. I think it's systemic, right? We got our credentials, we went through school, we took tough tests, and we want to wear that as a badge of honor. And I think the beauty of what we talk about is asking those great questions and being curious and doing that deep discovery. So I wanted to explore with you the power questions. I know you study questions. I know you've researched it, right? You like asking questions. Can we start out first by maybe talking about the psychology of questions? Why is it that some questions feel scary and others don't?
Money questions generally, feel a little bit scary for people, just simply because everybody's heard probably of the Socratic method. If you've watched any movie from like the 80s that takes place in a university campus, it's all like all these kids and then evil professor like yelling at people. Sadly, that's not actually what the Socratic method was, but this is what the Socratic method has become. And so it's just this idea that, when you're put on the spot, when you hear somebody ask you a question, your brain automatically knows there's a right answer. And now sitting in front of this professional, you could be asking something innocuous, or you feel, and in the sense that's just like, share with me about your financial goals. And they automatically start thinking, wait, am I supposed to have financial goals?
Yeah. Like, what are other people's goals? Yeah.
What should they be? Like we start doing this, automatically in our heads. And so even how we phrase a question can make a difference, so phrasing it instead as a command, so instead of, what's been going on, with you financially that, made you decide to reach out to a financial planner, you could say, tell me, I'm interested in hearing what's come up for you. So just saying that, tell me, I'm interested in hearing, before you actually ask the question can make it sound like more of a command, make it sound a little bit gentler. Another way to do this, so there's questions, there's commands, but there's also invitations. So this is kind of using like, would you be willing? Or, hey, you've probably been thinking about this for a long time. I would really love to hear your thoughts. Share with me a little bit about blah, blah, blah. These are gentler. They're a gentler way. You're inviting a conversation, and to the brain, that feels different. That feels like, oh, Rory's maybe really interested in what's going on. Oh, like maybe he's, thinking that I'm wonderful and, that he just wants, to get to know me, which is a very different feeling than just walking in and somebody saying, okay, we're here. This is what we do in financial planning. Tell me what's going on. It can feel, even though we know that that's what they're there to talk about, they know that's what they're there to talk about. It can still feel like, I'm not sure that I want to, what's the right answer? We start doing that, and then also give really plain answers, like, oh, well, retire. That's probably a good goal. Maybe help my kids with college. That's probably a good goal. Not have student debt. There we go. That's probably a good goal. And not that those are bad.
What you want
those
to hear,
are great
what
ones,
you want to hear.
but they're not necessarily personalized in any way. So even just thinking about how you phrase that opening question. Is it a command? Is it a question? Or, is it an invitation? Can change the way that people respond to you.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of Robert Cialdini's influence book, but I actually like
Yeah.
his later work, Persuasion. And that's really the
Mm.
build up before you're going to start influencing people. So setting the stage, an email as far as an agenda before the meeting, setting up the room and how it's going to look, not being too intimidating. Can you talk about how we can use persuasion? Whether it's coaching someone before the meeting, to be able to have a productive and effective type of engagement there, Meghan?
Yes. So one, always set an agenda.
Yeah.
And people always ask, well, my clients don't like agendas. Well, then they won't read it, but you can still send it. Like that's not a reason not to send it. And what sending an agenda does is not only makes you just operationally maybe more efficient and clear, but also tells them this is what's coming.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, and maybe even put in a sample 2, 3, 4 questions. Here's some of the things that we typically cover. I would love it if you were to think about these. Maybe you can email me if you have some initial thoughts. This is what we're going to do in the next meeting. That it just takes all of that ambiguity. Like, what are they going to ask me? What do I need to know? Should I be prepared? Do I need to look at my tax statements? Like, you've now made it clear what it is you're going to ask and why.
And then also, I use this, and specifically, is there anything you would like to discuss during the meeting? I always make sure.
Yeah. I definitely think letting them know, or, putting at the end, we can make adjustments to this, anything like that. It's your time. These were top of mind for me. Would love to hear what's top of mind for you. This sort of thing. Yeah, definitely to make it a two-way conversation. But for you being the professional, setting the agenda, saying, here's what I would like you to think about. These are some things I typically ask, can take a lot of anxiety out of the equation.
Yeah.
Another thing that can be helpful, especially if they have never met you before, is to record a little loom. Make it like, it doesn't have to be more than like 90 seconds. But even if you were just like, hey, I'm Rory, and I, love being a financial planner, and I've been a financial planner for, 26 years. And, my favorite thing about it is this, I can't wait to meet you and learn about you. It doesn't need to be any more than that, but now they get a sense of who you are, what you look like, they hear your voice, all of these things, kind of like take a little bit of, people love those dating apps for a reason. You can kind of look at the person and like read about them. You're like, do I really like this person? But when you go to meet them, it's a little bit warmer. You're like, okay, like sort of look like
I kind of know this person, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Like anytime you can create, I think that sense of, me.
Familiarity.
I want to be here. We're good.
And that's why I think it's for social media, because I'm obviously on social media a lot, LinkedIn. I have a personal brand, but they get to know you and like you, hopefully, right? And
or
using,
they don't,
and then you don't call. Why is my phone ringing? But I think that's the beauty of using social media and persuasion to really get them to like and know you before they ever step into an office or a Zoom meeting with you.
Yeah. I think stuff like that is huge, because financial professionals, whether you guys want to be or not, or ladies, it's intimidating.
Yeah.
It's intimidating. And if you can make it less intimidating, just by making yourself more known, by sort of setting up, a very simple agenda about what's going to happen, sharing what you might ask, or, what you typically ask. I think those are all things that can really lower the stress level, and just have a positive influence on the meeting generally.
Yeah. Let's talk about a couple other questions. I love scaling questions, by the way. It's one of my favorite things to use. When I started using it, it was a total game changer. So let's talk about that. I know there's a couple other ones that I saw you talk about, projective questions. I think there's swing and infer questions as well. Can you talk about those different types of questions?
Yeah. So scaling questions, this everybody kind of knows the beginning, right? You're like scale of 1 to 10, blah, blah, blah. So maybe scale of 1 to 10, how you feeling today? Like, and being totally confident.
I'm a 6, Meghan. It's early.
Okay, well, 6, great. Tell me what we need to accomplish in the next like 30 minutes. to help you feel maybe like a 7 when you walk out of here. So it's not the first part.
Right.
It's the like classifying, categorizing, what does 6 even mean? And how can we get up one higher? If somebody comes in and they say that they're a 2, you can always ask them, this might sound kind of funny, but I'm really curious as to why you didn't say 1.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, well, I'm here, I'm trying,
Yeah.
and they're kind of listing their positive reasons.
Positives. Yeah.
Sometimes people, when they're not feeling so great, they really need that, a little bit of boost of dopamine there. And so it's not about the initial scale. It is about how you use the follow-up. I love to use them for all kinds of things, like in at the end of a planned presentation meeting, so scale of 1 to 10, like how willing or ready do you feel, to start implementing some of this next week?
Yeah.
If they're like 3, you're like, okay, let's talk about that a little bit. But it's better that they told you there, than just getting home and not doing anything. Another great time to use scaling questions is when you know that someone's not doing well. And so this could be maybe they've lost somebody, maybe they just found out some bad news, maybe they've lost their job. And, we care about them. And so we want to ask, are you doing okay? But we know that the answer is no. Or we know that they're just going to respond with fine, but which also is a terrible answer. So instead of asking how you doing, just say, scale of 1 to 10, how's your energy? How's your energy? And if they say, 8, I'm all right. 8, I'm here. Great. Let's do what we can to get you to 9. I'm glad that you're feeling like you want to get stuff done. That's wonderful. If they say 2, you say, I get it. There's some really hard stuff going on right now. Let's go to lunch.
Yeah.
Like you are not going to get anything done in that meeting. Or if you did manage to get something done, they are not going to remember that it happened. Like
Right.
there's no point. There's no point. And you would be better off, just building your relationship with them, just being present with them, than trying to say, well, okay, you're
Yes,
not feeling so great, but let's look at these tax projections.
Yeah.
Like, no,
No.
just take them to lunch and talk to them about, what's going on. That is far more productive in that moment. And you can get there so much faster, because if you just ask how you doing and they say fine, you're just going to robotically, go into the meeting, but if you recognize, oh, they are not good, they're like below 5, then let's do something else. Let's get out of this, because this isn't gonna help, So scaling questions can be super insightful for all kinds of reasons and can be used at any number of places, but I happen to like those 2 places a lot. You asked about projective questions. Projective questions are kind of like just brainstorming questions. What would, or, tell me a little.
Do anything.
Yeah, if you could do anything, the point of these is that they're so open, they're so broad. There's no, we just want to get them talking. We want to understand, what's important to them. And the trick to any of these is that it's a follow-up, so then they say something and you're like, that's interesting. No one's ever said that, tell me a little bit more. And now you've got them going. So projective questions are just great open-ended questions. And then now I just forgot.
And swing and infer.
Yeah, swing and inference. These 2 are the ones that sound more like invitations to the brain, where you're saying, would you be willing? If you ever can't get paperwork from a client, and or you have a teenager and you want them to bring home milk, or you don't want your spouse to murder you when you say, oh crap, I forgot to pick up this thing. Can you go get it? Just say, you just type to them, would you be willing?
It's so powerful.
And it's that invitation,
Why is that so powerful?
Like, can you pick up some milk?
Yeah,
they'd be
can
like,
you go pick up some milk? Yeah, no, please pick up. Please pick up some milk, right?
Yeah, still no.
Why is willing so powerful, Meghan?
It creates cognitive dissonance in the brain. You're like, wait, am I not willing?
Am I not a willing person? Is that what it is? I'm not a willing person?
Yes. And people don't like that feeling.
You're right.
And so they are much more likely to be like, well, I am willing. And so it happens a lot faster than that, but we don't like that phrase. We're being invited to do something, it's like asking somebody to do you a favor, that it
Yeah. Would you be
changes.
willing to give me $200 right now?
Yeah, you're just kind of like, well,
Well,
whereas no,
normally.
maybe, if there was a reason, sure. Yeah, it just changes the way that it feels at the brain level. And
Yeah.
so, fun tricks like that. And I also like the ones where you're like, hey, you've been thinking about this for a while. That's clear. Tell me about blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sure, that you've been noodling on this, and so that's an interesting thing. Like there's a fintech company that I work with. It's called Coupler. Coupler
Yeah.
matches financial advisors and clients. And one of the fun things that we have is some data. And
Yeah.
and it's very interesting to see that when we ask people, the consumers of financial advice, future consumers of financial
Yeah.
advice, how long have you been thinking about this? Most of them say 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
So I think to ask somebody, in a financial planning meeting, man, it seems like you've been thinking about this for a while. Tell me where you're at. Tell me why you've decided. Tell me, what you think is next. Share with me a little bit about, what you've been thinking about. What this does is not only just a
Yeah.
recognition that they did not just wake up on a Tuesday and say,
Right.
what, I'm going to call a financial
Well,
planner.
financial advisor. Yeah.
Yeah, like no one does that. And so we
Right.
shouldn't treat them like that.
Yeah.
That sort of exploratory, that curiosity, that appreciation for this is a fully formed person with fully
Yeah.
formed ideas, and I need to be curious about them before I start pouring my advice onto it. That just sort of dimension of respect in many ways of appreciating that they've come to this point and what was happening before, I think can be really nice to hear, as far as it goes to be a consumer.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. As far as that first meeting, say this is initial meeting, when do you ask that question? It seems like you might be thinking, I've been thinking about this for a while. Because it seems like you should have a little bit
Oh yeah, it wouldn't be my first
runway.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when's the optimal time you think, Meghan, to kind of ask that question?
I would say 2 or 3 questions in, or if it seems to you, you've been doing this a long time, you can kind of
Yeah.
read people's faces, you
Yeah.
can read their body language. Maybe you're thinking, there's something under the surface, like there's
Yeah.
something that they're not saying to me. And
But
then you can say, it really seems,
yeah.
like you've been thinking about this for a while. Some of the things that you've said have made me think that this has been on your mind. Share with me, what, like, more about this, like what were you doing 6 months ago? What were you thinking about a month ago? What has brought you to this point? What have
Over
you
time.
tried? These are all different ways to kind of bring that out a little bit. They are figuring out, what they should tell you, what they shouldn't tell you, what's okay to say. Back to kind of what we were talking about in the very beginning. I would argue that most consumers, I would argue that many financial planners don't know how to talk about money.
Yeah.
It's weird. We don't do that with other people. We don't often do that with our families. We don't necessarily do that with our partners. And so now we're in front of this person, and this might be a nervous topic. It might be kind of a shamey topic. It might just be an awkward topic, but it's also not a topic that we've ever had any practice in.
Yeah. We don't have the
And so
reps.
we're doing this for the first time,
Yeah.
no reps. And so figuring out what to say, that isn't socially awkward, even though that we know talking about money is awkward, figuring out the words that I've never spoken before, like how would anybody know to do that? And so the more curiosity that you can show, the more sort of scaffolding you essentially provide that, like, hey, this is where we talk about that. I am really curious what you were thinking about, a month ago, and what sort of maybe you were thinking about last week, and what have you been reading, and who else have you talked to about this, and what did they think, and what did you think of that? Any way that you can get them talking to you, storytelling about what they've been going through. This is more information for you, but also brings in their expertise on the fact that they know themselves best, and that can feel very good in a meeting.
Yeah. I was just speaking with Tim Maurer, and he talked about how the CFP is structured, and we have all the different modules, and it's very technical. And if we had to do it again, thinking about this from first principles, kind of flip it on its head and be more qualitative and do the more life planning first. Is maybe that the systemic issue? It's so technical. Maybe this profession was born out of investments, right? And that we kind of hang our hat on in stocks, investments, and we really don't go into more of the holistic nature, the life planning nature of being that human first approach is the problem. We just don't have training in that, or it's relatively new. I know you're doing the training there, Megan. Can you maybe talk about that? How maybe it's systemic, and that's the problem, and we need to reshape the conversation.
I definitely think that. I mean, I think many of our sales practices, and I don't use sales as like a bad word. I think that many of even just the process of financial planning, that it's
Yeah.
like we have an intro meeting and then we have a discovery meeting, and
Discovery.
like this is consulting, which
Yeah.
is sort of what financial planners do. But many consultants say, "Here's my report, see ya,"
Yeah.
which is not what you do. You're actually supposed to help them implement it,
Yeah.
And a lot of consultants don't necessarily care, how excited you are or aren't, about what they think that you should do. And financial planners care very much about that. So I would say that even the process of financial planning, if I had my way,
Yeah. First
look
principles. How would Megan build it?
it would look very different.
Yeah.
And then I would also say that, yeah, just so much of it is the artifacts of how this industry became, like how this even
Origins, right?
thing. Yeah. And yes, I do think, so there's a researcher, his name's Richard Boyatzis. His famous model is intentional change theory. And I love this model because he works with a lot of MBA students. And so he's
Yeah.
very interested in trying to get MBA students to learn these leadership skills, learn these, different things that they need to learn, and then, actually apply them in the real world. And,
Yeah.
Similarly, we want financial planners to know these things. We want them to apply it in the real world. Financial planning professionals want their clients to know things and apply them in the real world. And so if you look at his model says, that you have to start with vision.
Yeah.
If you don't start with vision, people won't get excited that there's the ideal self and the real self.
Yeah.
And if you want change to happen and you want people to be excited about it, you have to talk about the ideal self first. And I think that this applies, in financial planning as well. When we want people to look at their wealth, or we want people to look at their financial future as possibility,
Yeah.
but instead we start with where you're at. And reality is important, but reality
Right.
has to be balanced with where we're going. And
With hope,
people
yes.
are motivated. Go on ahead. I'm sorry.
I said with hope. I'm sorry.
Yes. We want them to be motivated with hope. We want them to be motivated with possibility and opportunity. Very different than being so entrenched in the numbers and they're only motivated by fear.
Yeah.
Fear is a motivator for sure, but it's short-lived. Nobody
Yep.
wants to feel in fear all the time. Nobody wants to feel shame all the time. Like, to live like that is not a wellspring of motivation. Short-term motivation, maybe,
Yeah.
like I definitely motivate my kids with fear sometimes.
Yeah.
If I want them to, want something for themselves, I have to motivate them, using
Yeah.
optimism, using hope, using self-efficacy.
Yeah.
That these things are more powerful. And in his research on MBA students, it was really sad. He points out in his book that only 3% of these MBA students learned in school, gets retained over a certain period of time. And so this is why he came up with this model. And so with this model, more is retained.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of, that vision is super important. Then we bring in reality, and then we start mapping, between the two. And
Yeah.
great
The
models
first
like
engineer.
There's model does
Yeah.
the same thing.
I mean, I always talk about Hal and the future self, and
Yes.
I utilize the best hopes question. I've talked about the best hopes question.
Yes. The best hopes question is a wonderful question. I think that that's a great one to start a financial planning meeting with. And it can be about best hopes for your own personal financial success, but let's not overlook best hopes for our relationship.
Yeah.
Like that, at the end of the day, that's what they're buying.
Yeah.
They get the financial planning software and they get the advice, but but like the relationship is what that advice travels through. And so it's best hopes for, what you want for your financial future, but it's also best hopes for how are we going to work together?
That's why
How
I trademarked return on advised ROAR, return on relationship. That's what's going to set us apart here, Meghan. As AI and the software continues to get better, it's that relationship that they're gonna want to continue to go to because you understand them as a human.
Right, right. And we need, back to the very beginning, we need other humans. Don't do this alone. There's no point. There's no point. You will enjoy it more. You will have greater success. You will have somebody to celebrate your successes with. You will have somebody stand by you when things go wrong, because they will, not because you've done anything wrong, but sometimes because the world just changes.
Yeah.
And it is so much better, so much more fulfilling to have a buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, let's kind of dive in here because I did read the article. It was recently posted, but I think you've been talking about this for a while. The Fix, Find, Flourish, and how that framework can help encourage clients to stay engaged. So can you kind of give a breakdown of the Fix, Find, Flourish framework and how we can get clients more engaged?
No problem. So the Fix, Find, this is sort of how I kind of related to what we were saying earlier, how I envision the financial planning process.
Yeah.
That when people come in, they're usually coming in for a problem. I'm not saying that they don't ever come in like happy-go-lucky. I just really want to work with a planner. Like sometimes that happens, but most of the time there's a tax concern. There's a, am I going to be okay concern, any of these things. So they're worried about something.
I always joke that nobody comes in and saying, oh, I want to optimize my well-being.
Right. Yeah, they don't.
That's always a technical question. Yeah,
it is. And again, this is about teaching them the language of financial planning and about the language of wellness and how it's connected to money. They don't know that language yet.
Exactly.
They would never know, to say those things. So they come in, they're worried about a problem. Okay. During this time, you guys are arm in arm, you're running the software, you're looking at the scenarios, you're talking through different ideas. There's a lot of, camaraderie built during this time, with the client. And depending on what's quote unquote wrong or, what they're stressed about, this could be anywhere between 6 months to a year, maybe even 18 months. Maybe there's some restricted stock options or something. A few things have to happen, before we get to this outcome. So,
well, you're fixing a problem. So they get that immediate relief, like, oh, I've probably been stressed about this. I'm getting this fixed. I feel good.
Right. Yes. Immediate return on emotional validation of just somebody to work with. So then after fix phase, people kind of go into this find phase. And find phase, I think, has two parts. There's good find, where the first time you call your client and you're like, hey, it's time, let's come back in. We're going to have a monitoring meeting. It's going to be great. We're going to go over everything. And they're like, yeah, I want to hear about all the great work I've done and the fact that I'm going to be a millionaire when, whatever. Like they want to come, for those first few. To hear that everything's okay, to hear that they've done a good job, to check in. They're still, glow after glow of the fixed time frame where
the honeymoon period.
Really enjoy. It's a honeymoon period. And for the first time in their lives, and this is definitely what, financial planners need to pat themselves on the back about, they're going to say something like, hey, I'm really glad that you called. I actually feel really good. I know you're busy. I'm busy. I don't need to come in. And if that happens the very first time, pat yourself on the back, because you've got this person to like a place of financial serenity. They are not worried. And that's awesome. That's awesome. But if we let them stay there too long and we don't call them back in, it's the same principle as like the 7-year itch in your personal relationships, that, nobody wakes up in year 5 and says, I'm just going to like stop talking to this person and we'll just drift apart. But it does happen. We sort of stop being curious. We think we know, all.
It's on autopilot, right?
Yeah, it's on autopilot. And when this happens, I was for the Fix, Find, Flourish process and what ultimately became Flourish meetings, I was doing a lot of interviews with advisors, and I was asking them sort of about different stories that they had about clients, and the clients that got away, or the client that always shocked them.
Yeah.
It was always the client that said, I'm fine, I'm good, don't worry, everything's good, I'm good. And then called you out of the blue a year and a half later and said, hey, I need you to move my accounts into this other financial planner's world. And almost everybody that I talked to had some version of this story where they really didn't see it coming. And it always, not that they were purposefully an autopilot, but the advisor was trusting. This person says that they're fine, they're fine, they're fine. But, to Hal Hirschfield's research and things like that, that people do, just continue to change. And when we're not actively checking in with them, they're changing without us. And they may have things that happen, like this one advisor, his client kind of went from, I don't know, 2-3 million, had a big stock event, and now had like 20 million, over the course of a few years. And he called this client, but now he's got $20 million, the client is fine. The client knew that they were fine. And so they weren't having like any other discussion. So lo and behold, the client called and said, hey, I need you to move my money. When the advisor said, hey, Tom, like I thought things were good. Are you willing to just share with me what happened? Tom says, well, nothing really. It's just that I feel like with all this new wealth, I need different support. And I'm not
$20
sure.
million problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and of course, this financial advisor would have been fully capable of taking care of this person, but the person was kind of able to just grow in a different direction. They sort of fell in love with some other idea, if you want to think of it like that. Back to like personal relationships. We don't grow apart on purpose, but sometimes we do. And then we find someone else. And that's sadly sometimes how it happens. So it's this idea that fine is good, but fine should also be a bit of a warning, that, hey, this person might begin to disengage a little bit. Again, not everybody likes to talk about money all the time. Financial planners are weird, so clients going through a little reprieve where they're just kind of like, yeah, I don't need to think about that right now. And that feels pretty good. But don't let that continue. And so maybe after they've said it 2 or 3 times, you say, hey, I am so glad, to hear that things are just peaceful, that you're not worrying about this. Like, this is awesome. What this also tells me is that we have a really exciting planning opportunity.
Yeah.
And the client's going to go with you. The client's going to be like, okay, I did not know that, but let's do that. So now introduce Flourish meetings, this idea of that moving beyond just getting to like, 0 to 1, that we can go, well, -1 to 0. We can go from 0 to 1, where that we're not just maintaining, we're not just surviving, that we're actually flourishing, that we're thinking about possibilities. This is all of the positive psychology research. Dr. Martin Seligman has the very famous book, Flourish.
The PERMA V framework.
Correct, the PERMA framework. And so advisors who don't know what the PERMA framework is, it's PERMA. The P stands for positive emotions. This is things certainly like joy and happiness, but this can also be resiliency. This can also be coping. So we go through hard things, so how do we face them? It's not all just like happy-go-lucky all the time. The E is for engagement. This people have probably heard of flow. This is you're doing something and you just kind of lose track of time. It's a little bit hard, but like engaged hard, not necessarily like, oh, I'm never gonna be able to do this hard. That we need that in our lives. R stands for relationships. In particular, positive relationships are so important. The research from the Harvard longitudinal study that Waldinger and Scholes, they just put out that book maybe 2 years ago now, called The Good Life. Their entire book, everybody should read the whole book, but the whole book can be summed up in one sentence. If you want to have a great life, love people and allow them to love you. Like that is the number one thing. So then beyond relationships, which are very important, is the M, which is meaning. Something bigger than oneself. Sometimes this is religion. Sometimes this is the arts. Sometimes this is just like, being a part of a community and giving to that community. And then the A is for achievement, that we, as humans, we like to have a list, cross it off, run the marathon, do the thing. Although I don't run marathons, that's weird. So like, there is so all of these things combined, are the PERMA model, and they are not necessarily separate. They interact with each other. You could imagine somebody that, with their best friend decides to take up a new hobby, They begin to get better at that hobby, but while they're practicing, they're really engaged. They're with their friend. They are learning coping skills.
Yeah.
They are getting joy out of laughing with their friend. So all of it works together. And this is really the science of wellness. This is the science of flourishing. And so knowing these things and knowing that your client is in a really safe place. Remember, only 2 to 3, 5 years ago, they came in and they were in fix mode. They were so focused on that problem. Now they're a little bit lighter. They're on the plateau. They can see what is in front of them, and they're not necessarily looking through this like scope of fear and stress. For the first time in their life, they can look at their wealth.
Yeah. And look at possibilities.
Through possibility, through opportunity. And knowing that these 5 factors, matter so much to well-being, that now the Flourish meeting, and because your relationship with them has now spanned a couple of years, you are closer to them, you are more connected to them, you have been teaching them how to have money conversations, you have been, demonstrating that like we talk about money differently here.
Yeah.
And so you're going to invite them in and you're going to ask them questions, related to these different parts of PERMA. You're going to understand, like, do they want to start using their wealth in a way that supports things that fall under meaning? Is there a way that they can use their wealth to get more engagement? How are they thinking about the relationships in their life? And this isn't necessarily just giving money. This could simply be, these are things that I care about. I want to take more of my family with me. I want to do my kitchen so that my family comes over every Sunday and we have dinner together.
Yeah.
There can be any number of ways that you form this, but that we are setting the stage as the financial advisor and scaffolding and providing structure for this conversation, that these are the things that matter to living a good life. And we are in a place where we can start very actively choosing to put money towards these things in maybe ways that we had not done before, maybe ways that we couldn't even see were possible before.
Yeah. Speaking of putting money, speaking of that, because I heard you on another podcast, Meghan, and I want to have you touch on this about putting money into things we may have not thought of. I know it's kind of a little bit controversial. It talked about how maybe instead of spending money on your kid's college education, that you can put money away for trips and experiences every year. And, I know all the research shows that, many of our childhood memories come from vacations, and how impactful that is for a family to have those meaningful moments. So can you kind of talk about that? I know it's a little controversial, but how we can.
Are you asking? Is it controversial because you're asking? Should you save for college or should you save for vacation?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
This is I had this conversation with somebody, a financial planner who was very much like 529s. And I said exactly what you said. I said, look, my family helped me with college and that's great.
Yeah.
But I would have given anything, for some of those more time doing some of these things. Like when I think back on some of the memories that we have as a family. And so I would say that if you have the opportunity to do both, do both.
Right.
Maybe it's not about fully funding a 529 or whatever, some other account for money. It could just be about partially doing it. I think that given how important relationships are to your life satisfaction, and that potentially, saving for holiday time, for that just going to concerts. Like I feel like every dad I know took their young daughter to like go see the Swiftie concert, and they were glittered out and everything. And it's just, they talked about how wonderful it is, and their daughters talked about how wonderful that is. And you just can't get stuff like that back.
No.
And, obviously I think that college is important. I've been in college for like, 9 million years, it seems, but, and it's so important for, what you become.
Yeah.
But in terms of, like if you are a parent and you are just, trying to do so many things at once, and you're just like, I'm not even enjoying this, I'm spending so much of my time trying to fund this account and do this and take care of my retirement while I take care, like, I would say talk to your financial planner, slow down, maybe put half that money in the 529 and put half the money into a savings account and go on vacation with your family,
Yeah.
or don't go on vacation with yourself. Give yourself a break is also okay. But you can't get that time back, and building those memories, building those strong social bonds, demonstrating how important that is, especially in a world where it seems like a lot of I was just reading a statistic the other day that was saying something about how in the 50s, how many people reported maybe feeling lonely or how many close relationships people had versus today. And we're down
It's
by like
plummeting.
7%.
It's plummeting.
Plummeted.
Did you read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation?
I have not read that yet, but
Oh,
it's on my
yeah.
list.
It's pretty
But yeah,
fascinating and
I mean,
scary.
stuff like that. It's like I would say making an impact on that is
Yeah.
far more important, because they're probably still going to go to college, and so if they have to
Right.
take out a student loan, okay, but maybe by the way things are going, like who knows what even
What
the next
college
10
would
years
look like.
is going to look like in academia.
Yeah.
And so yeah, sometimes your presence matters, and that's not just like in the exchange of a 529, upon turning 18. So I'm sure that goes against what many financial planners think. So I'm not saying if you can do both, do both. If you can split it, split it. And
Is there going to be a designation like financial and experience planner? Like,
that
like
would be cool.
that'd be,
That
if
would be
someone get that
cool.
little niche, right? I'm not only a financial planner, I'm an experience planner as well. I
Mhm.
think that could be a
Yeah,
good niche.
I like it. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of goes back to like the olden days of the people that planned vacations. I always thought that would be a super fun job. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's something to it. There's something to it for sure. To get people to care, and even Hal Hirschfield's research talks about that too. That we can't be
Experiences.
so
Yeah. In the here
focused
and
on the
now.
future
Yeah.
that we forget about enjoying our present. So there has to be a balance, and right now we're so hyper focused on
Hyper
the
focused.
future.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been awesome here, Megan. Thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to share with our audience here?
If you've enjoyed today's conversation, I would just say come find me at Shaping Wealth. There you can look up my sad blog, the less lonely
The
money on
less lonely
Substack.
money.
Yeah, which it is really good.
If it bleeds, it leads. So, I mean,
together.
if it bleeds, it leads. You're probably going to get a lot of subscribers there, Megan.
So I'm into that. And yeah, I enjoy talking to financial planners. So if something in here I've said that you have a curiosity about, please email me. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll have you back on again in the future here, Megan.
sounds good. Take care.
Thanks. Yeah.
All opinions expressed by Rob Santos and Rory Henry on this website podcast interview are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Arrowroot Family Office LLC or their parent company or affiliates, and may have been previously disseminated on television, radio, internet, or another medium. You should not treat any opinion expressed by anyone as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only as an expression of their opinions. Past performance is not indicative of future results.